We need to talk about Sombra. There's a recent rework to Sombra that and gave her a lot of little changes. A couple of them that we'll highlight really quickly here. Translocator and Stealth are now tied together, and Stealth is on a timer, so there's no infinite Stealth for staging however and whenever you want. In fact, you have to use your Translocator to stage, which can lead to some interesting gameplay loop ideas. We'll talk about that one. And then also Opportunist is back, which essentially means that any hack target you do 20% more damage to. So there's been a couple of other minor tweaks, so we're not going to focus on that. But those are the big two main ones. The problem with this rework has essentially been where you're able to use your Translocator to use Stealth for staging. But the problem is that you can't actually initiate until you're unstealthed, because by the time that the stealth ends, you have about 2 seconds left in your Translocator so you can actually get out. So the problem is if you use your stealth and then you would look to initiate, all right, here we go, you don't have an escape cooldown for 2 or 3 seconds. So you're very vulnerable for any staging that you go in. Alternatively, if you use your Translocator in stage and you wait for stealth to expire, okay, yes, now you have Translocator in a few seconds, that's great. But the problem is that the entire point of the stealth as an initiation tool is gone. Now, I have never been a big fan of permanent stealth. I think the ability to stage and position however you like with zero risk is something that really shouldn't be involved in the game. There should be at least visual information about when and where you are. And I think it's a good change that we're removing permanent stealth. However, I don't like that this doesn't decouple stealth and Translocator, because the whole point of Sombra should be that stealth is on a timer, yes, but there's an actual ability for you to either deepen your angle with Locator or disengage from your staging with Locator. And right now you have to use really basically both of your mobility tools in one. Now, this is not really addressing the elephant in the room, which is Sombra's identity as a whole. You see, Sombra has always been maybe the most fundamentally flawed character besides Widowmaker in Overwatch since her design. You have a character that has stealth, which has always been a problematic thing in any PvP game. A character that in her rework has been revolving more around her assassination, one-shot style of playstyle with her hack virus, which has always been problematic in a PvP game. But that's changing her from a situation where a lot of her utility revolved around her hack, which was a very hard CC, and even now is still a CC that can be frustrating to play versus, and that is something that has also always been problematic in a PvP game. So she really has the holy trifecta of everything difficult to balance, and I want to give the developers credit for actually trying things. But the question is what does Sombra need? But see, the problem with Sombra prior to her rework and after her rework is she keeps bouncing between two extremes. We either have the hard backline assassinator playstyle, which is not healthy for the game, or you have the basically off angle, soft off angle, deny the enemy tank from doing anything, hack off of cooldown, farm EMP, which is also not very functional. You see, one playstyle that Sombra really has never had, at least for very long, I mean, not to really my knowledge ever, is the ability to just fight like a normal DPS. You see, any other DPS, when they take an angle, the priority usually is to duel whoever's on that angle. Genji takes an angle, fights whoever's on the angle. Hanzo takes an angle, fight whoever's on the angle. And this often means that we have a lot of DPS versus DPS battles. But when Sombra fights, she doesn't fight fair. And so even when she does go for the Genji on the angle, the Cassie on the angle, the Bastion, the Torbjorn on the angle, the Echo on the angle, a lot of it is, I'm going to hack and virus you. If I don't, I die or fail and have to get out. If I do succeed, there's really nothing you can do about it and you're just instantly dead. It's a very gimmicky, rogue, ratty, nasty playstyle, and it's a part of the reason why people really don't like playing versus Sombra, because even when she isn't going for backline and is just fighting a DPS, it's basically all or nothing. Now, some of you might be like, well, that's part of the high risk, high reward aspect of the playstyle, and that's nothing particularly wrong with that, and maybe you're wrong, maybe you're right, excuse me. However, a lot of characters that revolve around similar gameplay loops are also very unpopular, and I don't think that's an accident. Think about what's another character within the Overwatch cast, tank, DPS, or support, that's really all or nothing in how they play. Widowmaker, Roadhog, and that's sometimes Hanzo. Characters that don't provide a lot of consistent utility, don't provide a lot of consistent pressure, and whose ability to duel is really revolving around their ability to one-shot. And I think that that's what makes people dislike this character, because even if there is a risk for the reward, even if there's skill sometimes involved in the execution, you see, I don't think Sombra's a low-skill character. It doesn't make it any more fun to play versus. You don't even know where she is. Her gameplay loop when fighting a DPS, even now, is incredibly fast. And if that doesn't happen, then she just dies, especially since the rework where there's been a little bit more risk involved. So what's the solution? Can we actually have Sombra's gameplay loop be a little bit longer than 1 second, whether it's staging on backline or just hacking the tank, off angling over and over and over again. How do we have Sombra control space and fight space without either being an obnoxious tank denier, farming EMP, basically turning brain off, or permanently in your backline assassinating people or wasting a lot of time? And I think that we have maybe not an answer, but some ideas to spit around. And I think like this is where I'm going to try to have a little bit of humility here. Well, I am going to have a little humility because I really don't know. These are just some ideas here. So what is the identity of Sombra? Medium range flanker with utility plus extra repositioning options. We want a flanker with a little bit of verticality. We want a flanker with more utility than the average Genji tracer and so on. And I think that we can keep that identity with her. But we need to discourage just the one-shot spawn camping. We need to discourage just strict utility through manual close range hack. And we need to encourage intelligent strategic dueling without removing our identity. Now, some of you might be saying, oh, but isn't that kind of already the case right now? Like right now, Sombra can kind of soft off angle. She can go for backline with her translocator and stuff. It's just a little bit harder to. Well, the problem is that even the soft off angle just doesn't really work, because the problem is if you put my Sombra here, the pressure isn't good enough. You have to get within range of hack. The problem with hack is you have to close proximity that doesn't necessarily play her effective range versus a lot of the cast. There's risk, and it's also easy to interrupt. So if she doesn't get opportunist, she doesn't do very good mid-range pressure. In addition to that, she has 225 HP. So she's almost impossibly easy to be able to clear out. In fact, if you think of any other medium range character when it comes to holding angles like this, not necessarily going for assassinations, Cassidy, Soldier, Sojourn, anybody, all of them put out more pressure than Sombra at this point in time. So the only thing that makes Sombra unique, again, is these assassinations. And now that there's more risk to the assassination, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does make it very frustrating for the Sombra. There's no real consistent gameplay loop with the translocator and stealth, as we talked about earlier. So there isn't really a good answer for Sombra right now. And does that mean that Sombra's bad right now? No, there might be a way to make her work, but it still doesn't mean that the rework was successful at actually dealing with her initial issues. So let's talk about what are some ideas here. First things first is I think that she needs 250 HP. Now this buffs both her backline presence and her off-angle presence, but we're going to try to discourage only going for assassinations a little bit later. Next, we're going to be splitting stealth from translocator. We're going to put stealth on a cooldown, 6-second cooldown, 5-second duration. So you've used stealth for 5 seconds. It probably maintains the detection resistance that it currently has. I think that aspect is kind of interesting. And then once it's used, you have on a cooldown. And honestly, all of these numbers, I'm just spitballing. This could easily be 8 or 9 seconds. It could be shorter. I don't really know. Without testing it, this is just spitballing ideas. And the idea here is that you use your stealth to take a little bit of an angle, you pop out, and you apply pressure. You could even argue here that there's less of a need for stealth if her mid-range pressure is better, because what is stealth used for if not repositioning? And why do you need to reposition deep if you can actually apply mid-range pressure? You don't have to go for backline anymore. So I'm open for interpretation. Some of the people in my chat were discussing something like 2 translocators, but I think keeping stealth as part of Sombra's identity could be cool. Basically what you'd have is you'd have a medium range duelist who's going to constantly change her position, but change her position unpredictably. And I think that could be interesting. Now, this is the big one that we're going to try to use to discourage going for backline, to discourage going for only backline assassination. Still make them functional in certain situations, but not quite as dominant. This is going to be combining virus with hack. You hit the virus, you hit the hack. We can shrink the projectile if we need to, because it is a pretty forgiving size right now. 1 to 1.5 second silence, which is essentially the hack duration. 30 damage initial, 30 damage over time over 6 seconds. So this is essentially half of the current virus damage. However, on application, and not only does it do the 30 damage initially, but it does hack them for 1 to 1.5 seconds. One of the key components of balancing that I've learned is that CC is stronger on tanks often, damage is stronger on squishies. So when you have something like this where it's 60 damage, yeah, it's not a lot, but it is something, and it is something that's going to allow you to win a duel more consistently. So the question is when you take an angle with Sombra, do you want to utilize this to win or practice taking a duel with a DPS? Or do you want to use this to disrupt and create a window of opportunity in the enemy tank? This is something that you actually have to think about. So even though we're combining abilities, I think we're actually introducing more choice, because now it's not just about the virus damage, it's actually about the utility of the hack combined with it. And now we're actually making hack a skill shot. This does 2 things. Number 1, it makes it harder to land versus characters that it's easy to land on right now, like Doomfist and Wrecking Ball. But it also makes it easier to land on characters that you can't hack at all. Okay, talk about the Cassidys, talk about the Sojourns, talk about a lot of the other characters where it's almost impossible to get that hack off unless you catch them totally unaware. Well, now it's actually possible if you're good enough to hit the shot. I think in addition to that, right now she has a primary fire pause where she does damage and there's a slight delay before you can do damage again after virus. I think we could probably reduce that to make it more flow, easier in a 1v1 situation. You can still see enemies ult status for the brief 1.56 seconds, or 1.5 seconds, excuse me. No wall hacks probably, and then probably put it on a slightly longer cooldown. And another idea here is where you could actually hack health packs with virus from a distance, right? So you're here, I can virus the health pack. That was supposed to be a virus. Beautiful. You could actually virus the health pack from range. I think there could be lots of fun little interactions and outplays from this here. I think Opportunist probably needs to go. Obviously, if we're tying virus in with hack and reducing the duration a lot, I don't think we need Opportunist anymore. I don't think she needs the additional damage. This would, if we kept Opportunist, would basically reintroduce spawn camping and stealth killing. I think Locator on the longer cooldown is fine if stealth is also a cooldown so that we can actually manage both of those CDs. And then I think we can reduce her ammo to 40, maybe buff her fall off by a little bit and slightly tighten spread so that we can actually have some sort of mid-range pressure. Now what this means is now that with the 250 HP and a slightly tightened spread, we actually have a gameplay loop of where you actually have to decide, do I want to off angle and pressure tank? Do I want to use my angle and my HP and my virus hack combo to take a duel with the DPS immediately? Right? Or do I want to go for backline assassination situationally? Essentially what we've done is we've not really removed backline assassination potential. We've just made it a little bit weaker. We've not really removed the potential for standing and hacking tank. We've just made it a little bit weaker. And what we've made stronger is her ability to find somewhere in between. So now you really have three options with Sombra. Harass tank from mid-range, fight a DPS, or go for backline, but all of them have risk reward. And you have to decide about which one makes the most sense in this situation. And I think that's what's missing with Sombra. It's always been, oh, this is clearly the play to play, or this is clearly the way to play. And that's kind of what's been missing. So last little thing here, we talked about EMP, maybe reintroduced Opportunist, so the damage boost for hack targets for EMP only, 8 seconds hack, something that's more interesting for the Sombra herself rather than just more damage, more hack duration. You can tweak the silence duration, you can tweak the percentage damage. I think we overall want a weaker ultimate than live because for, I mean, legitimately, what, 6 years, 7 years, Sombra has been basically play for EMP, OP, everything else is kind of midway. I don't know. Basically, here's the thing. My ideas are revolving around finding not the middle ground, but finding the actual capability of allowing Sombra's gameplay loop to not be so incredibly tight, incredibly fast, and to find something that allows her to have more choice besides strictly tank or strictly backline. There needs to be some sort of in-between. I think Virus has been a relatively good idea in terms of the skill shot, but because so much of her damage is tied into it and it's exacerbated by hack, it's basically if you hit the Virus, great. If you don't hit the Virus, you can't duel anybody. I think that's a very difficult gameplay loop. You notice here that with this tweak, not only does it introduce the hack into the Virus, which honestly keeps Virus still pretty strong, but the key thing is because we have a fall off buff, slightly tightened spread, and 250 HP, we allow Sombra to miss Virus and still be a relevant duelist, right? It's still a mechanical duelist. It's like any other character. Sojourn misses her rail or Sojourn misses her disruptor shot. She can still compensate with some good mechanics or some good aim, and that's just not the case really with Sombra anymore. And that's the case with a lot of other DPS characters too. Soldier misses Helix should still be able to duel at a disadvantage. Cassie doesn't have hinder or roll. You should still be able to shoot people in the head. And I think that what makes Sombra unique is the fact that we have a flanker with a weapon that has that verticality, and I think we need to be trying to lean into that. So again, I'm not married to this rework. This is just a couple hours of brainstorming. I think my big point is pointing out the weaknesses of our current iteration of Sombra while trying to provide some solutions instead of just criticizing. I think that they're going to have to introduce some way where Sombra has some sort of mid-range pressure. I think they're going to have to shift power away from her Virus, unquestionably. And I think they're going to have to figure out exactly where are we going to have Sombra play. How can we have a character with this much utility that isn't incredibly frustrating to play versus? I don't envy their job. I hope that this may be useful to them. Maybe they can get some ideas. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. We had a lot of ideas. Some of them I didn't like, some of them I did like, and we'll see what we can do with this character.